slowing down has been a big part of this journey here, just allowing things rather than forcing things, allowing life to unfold, the great mystery, instead of forcing all these things to happen and pushing. It's allowing things and surrendering to what is happening. Welcome to another episode of Entrepreneurs in Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Harless. This is a podcast where we explore the healing potential of psychedelics, entrepreneurship, and amazing stories of resilience. If this is your first time here, welcome. I want to let you know that the show is continuing to grow. I just want to let you know that many of you are leaving me feedback, and some of them are just messages that are left on Instagram or even messaging me in general, text messaging. But I really appreciate all your feedback. And I'm actually going to get into that today in today's episode, because today is a very special episode. Before we get into that, if you would take a moment to like and subscribe on YouTube and also leave a review on Spotify or iTunes. This show is now hosted on Spotify, so I'm really proud of that because now we can have the video and the audio shared on Spotify. So if you're listening on Spotify, you can now watch the video. So today is a very special episode. Today is my 1 year in Costa Rica. So I've now spent 1 year living in Costa Rica. And I can tell you that in many ways, I never thought, in many ways, maybe in all ways, I never thought the day would come where I would move from where I grew up, which was in Massachusetts, and then lived about 2 decades in New Hampshire, to then move to Central America. And, some of you know my story. I didn't grow up traveling. We didn't travel to different places. We basically traveled to the beach once in a while in Hampton, growing up in Lowell, Massachusetts. And even that was, once in a while, maybe once every 10 years. So to travel solo to Costa Rica was not something that was in the cards. And so I'm going to get into that, and I'm going to get into some of the lessons that I've learned, and hopefully some of these lessons you can relate to, some of the lessons of hitting some rock bottoms, not only here, but also in life, going into some of the things that I've learned living here, where things have slowed down quite a bit being in Costa Rica, as you can imagine. So without further ado, let's jump into it. And so I want to start with talking about the feedback. First of all, the feedback I've been getting from many people from my past. And that's something that's really powerful and profound for me. A few of my guests have actually come from the past, meaning if you listen to the Psychedelics Today's podcast with Joe Moore and Kyle, Joe Moore was someone who went to college at Plymouth State University when I was there at 18 years old. He was a gentleman that I met my freshman year, and I only made it to my freshman year because I flunked out of school because I got into all kinds of substances, but it wasn't even the substances. It was really like I wasn't guided in a direction that was really helpful because I had so much work to do on myself in my journey that when I got to college, I the only way I knew how to really survive there was to numb out. But in any event, I met Joe Moore, and I remember meeting him and just being kind of amazed by his dorm room and how he looked like he had his shit together. And I very much didn't have my shit together. But the point is that this last year, I had a download, an epiphany with one of my friends about Joe Moore. Even though I didn't know his name, I didn't remember his name, but something came to me in a journey where I remembered that Joe Moore looked really familiar when I saw him on LinkedIn, and I reached out to him, and he was one of the guests on the podcast not too long ago. So my point is that the podcast has had this arc of a journey where it started with many entrepreneurs who are in recovery from workaholism, sex addiction. It could be substance abuse addiction. Maybe they just came through trauma, or maybe they came through really challenging experiences of fleeing a country that was a war-torn country. But whatever their recovery journey is from, the podcast has really turned into a podcast that's talking to many guests that not only have incredible stories of resilience, which I believe we all have, but also this journey of the healing potential of psychedelics and psychedelic-assisted therapy. So, with that said, I continue to receive feedback from friends. And just to let you know, I come from the world of abstinence sobriety. This wasn't my choice. I was court ordered and forced at 22 to be driven to Alcoholics Anonymous, to be driven to these 12-step groups, and it was court ordered. And in that, I found lots of principles and values and community that was extremely helpful. But there was also a lot of black and white thinking, which can be extremely helpful for people because that can give them a foundation. And it gave me a foundation. So I'm saying all this to say a lot of my feedback that I'm getting are people that I met way back in AA. And it's really interesting because of the arc of my podcast talking about psychedelic assisted therapy, which is obviously many people view psychedelics as drugs, and they are. And many of them have incredible benefits to people healing from treatment resistant depression or anxiety or complex trauma or PTSD. There's so many things that it also just higher consciousness and expanding your intuition. There's many, many different aspects of what psychedelics can do. So I wanted to start the podcast off by sharing all the gratitude I have for these people from my past and some from my present giving me feedback about the show that they're listening, because I don't know who's listening. It doesn't tell me who's listening. But if you're one of those people who are listening right now and send me a message, say, hey, I'm listening to your show, even if I don't like it, even if you trigger me, or send me a message and say, I love the show. Keep up the good work. I would love to hear that feedback, because it does motivate me when I get these messages of people that are listening to the show. So let's get into some of these ups and downs that have happened in the last year in Costa Rica. And we'll also talk about, even like hitting a rock bottom here. And so I wanted to share about some of the highlights and things that have happened. First of all, I discovered surfing here. And for some of you, if you've never tried surfing, which I never did until I got to Costa Rica, it's very challenging. It's one of the hardest sports I've ever done. And it's something that I really love and enjoy. And I get out there and I continue to try it. But there's something, if you've done surfing, there's something really special about surfing, which is there's this almost meditative quality of being on the ocean. And there's this ocean medicine that just floating around, maybe almost like being in the womb as a baby. And you have this incredible, almost a spiritual type experience. And then obviously there's a lot of exercise, and there's also the letting go of riding a wave, because every wave is different. So there's a lot of amazing principles of life and in surfing. So that's been a huge part of this transformation I've had here. When I say transformation, I mean inner transformation. Also, I've been able to do sauna cold plunge finally in my life. I've done cold therapy probably since 2015, but I have not been able to try sauna cold plunge. And so I've been able to do that consistently here for at least 9 months, 10 months. And that's also been really transformational. So really appreciate the sauna cold plunge. Highly recommend it if you can. And if you don't, if cold is not for you, even just trying to, get some water and putting ice in, let's say, a little bucket, and putting your face in the water for 10 to 15 seconds just to stimulate those positive stress responses and those neurochemicals that can be beneficial, those positive stressors. So let's get into some of this other stuff, like the jungle medicine. And what do I mean by that? I mean, just the jungle itself. If you've ever been to, I would say any forest really, but especially here, the dense jungle, there's some type of medicine where you can't, it's very beautiful, but you can't escape your shadows here, even without doing any type of psychedelic medicine. Just being here and how slow things are, and how the sun goes down every day around 6 o'clock and it's dark. And I've had so many times where I've just sat with myself here and have had this really deep cry, deep grief come that I've never experienced. Grief that has been suspended, and grief that has been deeply embedded in my my mind and my nervous system that I wasn't able to reach. So slowing down has been a big part of this journey here. And allowing has been a big lesson here. Just allowing things rather than forcing things. And this might be something that's obvious to you, but it's not obvious until you start to realize you're forcing many things to happen, and it's causing great distress. And it could be because of things that could feel really valid. Of course, you have a household to take care of, and you have children, you have business, you have all these things to take care of. But one of the things I've learned here is the more that I allow, and the more that, not allowing anything to come into my life, what I mean is allowing life to unfold, the great mystery, as I'm doing things to take care of my self-care, take care of myself. I'm instead of forcing all these things to happen and pushing, it's allowing things and surrendering to what is happening, who's around me, what are these messages I'm receiving when I'm in meditation or prayer, and slowing down. And that's been a big part of the healing of this deep grief that has come while being here. And I think one of the biggest things in this year being in Costa Rica is the crying. I've never cried so much in my life ever. I've cried more in the last, I would say, 9 months for sure, that I've ever cried in my life. And part of that has been this deep regret, deep disgust for some of the decisions I've made that have come throughout my life that I wasn't even aware of, because the way that my brain works, and sort of like this ADHD brain, which we can get more into that later, but this brain that just seems to have this intermittent reinforcement, where there's just this intermittent reward system that's built in, that does just finds a way to bypass this deeper grief. And if you're listening right now and you can relate to this, this is something that I've discovered in this slowing down of life here. Is there's this just deeper feelings of grief I wasn't able to access because I wasn't able to slow down enough to access them. So that's been a really big part of this 1 year, is allowing this grief to come, and these deeper cries. And I'm actually looking forward to more of that as I continue to, decide upon what is the next steps for me here, which for now it's going to be to allow myself to have these deep experiences here, and not change up what I'm doing right now, unless when I'm allowing, I'm guided in that way. But just allowing these deep emotions to come through. And through that, what has happened is I've actually become closer to some of the people I have the deepest resentment and hurt towards, like my family. And it's funny, I feel closer to my family than ever. Even though we're not talking any more than we were, I certainly don't see them as much, but I feel closer to them, because I feel a lot of this healing I'm doing is healing this generational trauma, and healing this family tree that all I ever really wanted was to have close relations with my family. But we've been so disconnected by the trauma, and so disconnected by addiction, and so disconnected by mental health issues and financial issues, that it's caused a great division. And so one of the things that I have come to not only grieve and cry, but also to feel empowered by, is that I feel closer than ever to my family. And I feel like that's something that's going to continue to expand. And that's something that I've been working on for a long time, multiple decades. So I'm really excited to allow this deeper grief to emerge as, okay, this is okay. And I can start to see my mother's pain and what she went through. And I can see my brother's pains and what they went through. And that's been part of this beautiful grief process that I've gone through here in the last year in Costa Rica. I've also had many people show me who they are. I've got to see the beauty and the ugliness of people. And that's been a really powerful life lesson in adulting and setting boundaries. And I think that's something that I needed to learn. Sometimes I have to learn the hard way. And I think that's, being warm, which is kind of my MO throughout my whole life as a coping mechanism, fawning, people pleasing, and being warm to people all the time can really be really destructive. And there's nothing wrong with being warm to people, but you also have to have some neutrality. You have to have that, let's say 80-20 rule, maybe 80% warm, 20% neutral towards people. If you're warm the whole way, it can actually be manipulative. And I've learned all these things about myself of how I've come across as coping mechanisms and as ways to receive love. That's how I received love as a child. If I was, destructive and crazy, and yeah, I could receive attention that way. But if I was warm and I was did self-deprecating humor, I would get the love I needed. And I also would feel that would allow people to have some of their own healing processes as I allowed them to experience me amusing them or being a jokester. These are ways that I receive love. And I understand more of that now than ever, and how that can still show up today. So that was another lesson. This is not going to be a tremendously long episode. I want to keep it short, but I just wanted to share some of these lessons that I've learned in this last year. Another thing is learning about the culture here, slowly but surely. I have a lot to learn, but learning from the Ticos here, learning from locals, and learning the importance of learning Spanish, which might seem obvious. I live in Central America. The native tongue is Spanish. So I picked up some of the words here and I've learned some Spanish, but my goal now in the next year is to really take Spanish seriously. And so if you have a way of learning Spanish that you really found helpful, let me know. I'd love to learn a way, not a quicker way, but a good efficient with my brain. My brain is, we're going to get into this a little bit, is there's this new term being thrown around all the time, is neurodivergent. ADHD is not new, but my brain, definitely, the longer I stay in Costa Rica and I get to slow down, I've realized like my brain is definitely more on the side of ADHD. But the thing is, there's a beauty in that. And that's the thing that I want to highlight. Many people have neurodivergent thinking or ADHD. And I realize how much this has actually helped me, as much as it's hurt me in some of the decisions that have been impulsive. There's also the reason I'm an entrepreneur in some ways is because of the way my brain works, of course, and being neurodivergent and having ADHD, it's actually helped me as an entrepreneur. I've made very bold moves, took very big risks. I've reached out to many podcast guests and people to be mentors, and it's worked. And part of that was just, sometimes it was my intuition, but sometimes it was just that thinking that's, a little more on the side of ADHD. So there can be a great gift in that. And that's another thing I've learned in the last year being in Costa Rica and slowing things down. So like I said, that neurodivergent ADHD type thinking has helped me to get incredible guests on the podcast. And then that's led to other guests that have come on this show that have asked me to be on the show. And they're people that were on my list of people I wanted to have on the show. So that's been really, really exciting. The other thing I want to share is this idea of psychedelic concierge, this work that I'm doing now, which is helping people, whether they're in America or in Costa Rica or any country, to be guided into the process of finding the right psychedelic assisted therapy for them. And this has been extremely rewarding. And this is something I've done for years. And I did this for many years and was not for being paid. I was just helping people find incredible facilitators to find healing. And so today I get to fully step into that work as a psychedelic concierge and be able to share the powerful psychedelic assisted therapy and the case studies, the powerful healing, the powerful stories, and also have the stories of people who have been hurt and they've had dysfunction and they've had this destabilizing experience. So including myself. So be able to have the balance of both. But if people are looking to engage in psychedelic assisted therapy, and there's so many different psychedelics. So, you have so many to choose. And obviously there's a limitation on what you can do and can't do depending on what country you're in, because many of them are still illegal. So these are the landscapes I get to help people navigate. And that's been one of the most rewarding things, is stepping into what I really want to do, which is help people to find more healing. And I think I've always wanted that since I was a child. And it's might have come through different religious beliefs, Then it was biohacking, whatever. It was sobriety, it was biohacking, all these things that I just wanted people to have a better life. And I still love all those different things, and I think they could be helpful. But right now, my main focus is psychedelic experience curation, helping people define healing through psychedelics. So if that's something that speaks to you and you want to have a conversation about that, please reach out. Send me an email, jesse@jesseharless.com. Send me a message on Instagram, and let's have that conversation. So, there's been a lot of lessons in the last year living in Costa Rica, and many of those lessons are continuing to unfold and expand. And I just want to let you all know that, like, being in Costa Rica, I thought, I would be regulating my nervous system on a daily basis, which in many ways I have. But I also thought there'd be a lot of, you know, healing. I knew that was coming, but I thought there'd be a lot of like joy and all these things. And you know what? There's been a lot of grief. There's been a lot of grief. And I'm grateful that sitting here in the jungle, being able to really be with myself and being able to also co-regulate with people that, like Dr. Kian, who's been on the show like 6-7 times, working with Dr. Kian, working with these different people to be able to co-regulate these experiences of deep grief, these deep embedded emotions, and let's call them injuries that I've experienced throughout my decision making and other people being in my life as a child, being able to just be with those tears, crying myself to sleep some nights, to be able and just being okay with that. I was afraid to do that. I was afraid that I'd have treatment resistant depression or something would happen if I was to cry myself to sleep. And now, if that happens, I allow it to happen. And when I wake up the next day and I feel amazing, many days I feel amazing, letting out that grief. So these are things I'm still exploring, this deep grief, these feelings of regret, these feelings that we don't want to have. We don't want to show people we have them either, because there's shame, and we have this ego, and the ego wants to show the world, whether it's through pictures on Facebook or Instagram or memes or whatever, that everything is good. Everything's always good. And the truth is, it's not always good. People are struggling. This is a time where people are disgusted. They are angry. And some of that is their own disgust. It's their own inner grief. It's their own ways that they haven't been taking care of themselves, whether that's through physical health or spiritual health or mental health, emotional health. So this is some of the deeper work that I've been exploring. I've been exploring that with some people as well, helping them to navigate that. And some of them, it's through the psychedelic experience, and with some, it's not. But hopefully today's episode was not a downer. I wanted to just be real with you that the last year in Costa Rica, there's been beautiful memories and pictures. And if you follow me on Instagram, sharing stories or the things I've shared, but at the same time, there's been many, many tears. And, now that I think about it, I haven't shown that side on social media. And I guess there's an advantage to not showing that, but I think maybe this next year, one of the things I'll commit to is sharing a cry, a tear, showing that it's okay for men to cry. I can only remember one time in my whole life that I cried with my brother, and I have an older brother. I don't think we've ever cried together. So I think, this is the opportunity to allow these tears to come, to allow this deeper grief to emerge. And so I'm going to leave you with this, that I'm going to be doing another solo cast, and it's going to be about more of this idea of neurodivergent, more of this idea of this ADHD thinking, but also more of the idea of some of these wounds or wounded memories. And it's not to bring everyone down, it's to illuminate some of these things that maybe you can relate to, with how these memories that are from the past are still impacting the present in major ways. And a lot of it is unconscious. So on another solo cast that I'm going to be doing very soon is going to be understanding some of these ways that I have self-soothed to help these feelings that are uncomfortable to find relief from these feelings that are been uncomfortable. And obviously, in the past, it might have been drugs and alcohol. It could have been sex. It could have been all these different things. But what about now? What are the ways that I still self-soothe when there's feelings of uncomfortability? So we're going to be getting into that. I also want to get into this idea of memories and the importance of remembering these memories. A lot of times our brain and our thinking is skewed to what we remember, and we remember the negative. We tend to remember the negative. So I want to get into the power of memories and remembering some of these good memories. Of course, we want to remember some of these hurts and wounds, but we also want to remember the highlights, and we want to also remember some of the highlights that have been good. And so I'm going to get into the power of memories and how we can really tap into memories and make them be remembered, but also to create new memories, and how we can do that, and working with the brain and working with breath and working with these different ways of a lot of it is thinking, to be able to create more memories. So with that, I hope you all have a blessed day. Pura Vida. Thank you for checking out Entrepreneurs in Recovery podcast. We are so appreciative that you are here. Make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe to the show on YouTube. Leave a review on iTunes and Spotify so more people can find the show. Once again, thank you so much. We have great episodes and content coming out in the future. Thank you for being here. Have a blessed day.